Hi guys, this is Sai Kumar Kortewada. In this video, we will learn about unit testing on template-driven form validations. To learn more about template-driven form validations and examples, please watch my Angular tutorial form validation video. I'll provide the link in the description. Let me jump into Visual Studio Code. So here I have created a form with two input fields, that is username and the password. Along with that, we have a drop down called as select and also a submit button. Here username and the password have two type of validations. One is required and one is pattern validation, whereas gender is having only required validation, and the button will be disabled if any one of the form field is invalid. So that is the use cases which we have covered in this particular form. And let me quickly jump into the output. So if you see here we have a username which is having a required, this field is required, and let me type something like ABC. So it is not a valid email pattern, so let me give @gmail.com, and now it was been vanished. And also we have password which is having at least one character, one special character, one alphabet, and one numeric value. So let me give ABC @123, and minimum of 5 characters it requires. Here we have a required validation. Again, if you see here, we didn't select anything, and let me select the mail. So now whenever the user clicks on the register button, then we will be getting a console. So this is enabled only when all the field validations are valid. So let me remove this field is required. So that is how we will be testing in our spec file. So let me quickly jump into the spec file. Let me create two variables. One is fixture, which is of type component fixture, which is of app component. And also let me create one let variable, and here also let me create one let variable. And here let me create one more instance, component instance colon, which is of type app component. So let me give semicolon. Now what I'll do is, after this compilation process, what I'll do is I'll assign this fixture values. Fixture is equal to test bed dot create component of what type of component, it's an app component. And also let me create component instance is equal to fixture dot component instance. I'll assign the instance for this. Let me save this. And now our test cases, let's write our test cases for both password and the username for the first time. Okay, so now username and password validation for required field. So to know whether it is required or not, it has to be touched. So let me get the elements first. So let me save this and go to the HTML. Here what I'll try to do is I'll try to validate this input field by using an ID. Let me give an ID called as ID is equal to username. To get this value, I'll use ID, and here also let me get this element by using ID is equal to password. And we are using some values which are given to the ng model by using a register object which is already defined in my component.ts here. So to bind this for the first time, what I'll do is I'll update my fixture dot detect changes. I'm detecting the changes, and then whenever my fixture is stable, then what I'll do is I'll have a callback. Inside this callback, let me get the username element which is of type HTML input element, and this can be get by using a fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector. What is my selector? The selector is hash username. And also let me get the password element colon, which is also a type of HTML input element is equal to fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector of what is the selector, that is hash. I want to go with password, which is an ID which is already defined in my HTML. So I'm getting two elements, and after getting these elements, what I want to do is I want to touch it and come out of it before entering some value. So let me use user element dot dispatch event. What is the event? First event is I want to give an event of focus. So whenever I focus it, the cursor will be going into that particular field, and I'm not entering anything, and just I want to come out. To come out, user element dot dispatch event of new event. I'll generate a event called as blur event. So these are the two events which will be triggered whenever I click on that particular user element and whenever I click on the outside the user element. Now what I want to do is I want to dispatch these events again by using event dispatch event of focus. This event will be generated on the password field, and also password element dot dispatch event of new event which is of blur event. So let me give semicolon. Now I am triggering two events on two elements. One is dispatch event of focus and dispatch event of blur. So now I have touched two of these elements and I came out of the field. Now I have to get error. What is the error type I will be getting? I'll be getting an error that is a required error. So this error I have to get. So what I'll do is I'll create one ID on the top level element, that is username errors. Why? Because I'll be getting only one at a time. So username errors, and also let me create one more ID for this div as password errors. So let me save this, and what I'll do is I'll get that elements after updating this particular fixture. Let me update the fixture one more time because I have generated the dispatch events. So update or detect changes, and once this fixture is again stable, so now I'll be getting the errors which is a promise based, and again here it will have a callback. Inside this callback, let me get this particular username errors. So const username errors colon, which is of a type HTML div element, and it is equivalent to fixture dot debug elements dot native element dot query selector of what is my selector. It's a password selector. So let me give semicolon, and here I got the username errors, and then also we need to get about password errors, and this should have HTML div element again, fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector of, this is actually a username, this is an username with hash, and this is the hash password. So I'll get the two errors, but the ID is different. We have to pass this username errors as an ID, pass this, and also password errors as the second one ID. So let me give semicolon. Now what I want to expect is I want to expect of username elements or username errors dot children. It will have the children which should be rendered, like either this span should be rendered or this span should be rendered. So we will be rendering only the required field because we are touching and we are not entering anything. So dot length should be dot to equal of 1, and also expect of username errors which is having a children, and the children, the first element of the children should have an inner HTML which is equivalent to our string, that is this field is required. So let me call this field is required, and that inner HTML should be equivalent to this particular required field. Now what I'll do is I'll expect the same strategy on the password errors. So password errors dot children dot length, again this length will be equal to 1, because in the password also we are getting only one error, that is equivalent to required error. Expect of password errors dot children of 0 dot inner HTML, that should be equal to our, this field is required, but this time it is a password field. If you go to the password field, the 0th element is this span element, this field is required. Let me copy this and pass here. Let me save this and also give semicolon. So if you see the errors, we got two errors, that is one error where ng form not found. Why? Because we are using forms, but the form module has not been injected into our import statement. Let me inject forms module and save this and check the output. So it has been successfully passed. So our username and the password validation required fields has been successfully passed. And also we can test even the one which is a select. So let me add one more ID for this select. So select is my ID, and the error validation, let me add the error validation ID also, is equal to gender errors. So let me add this, and here instead of select I'll add gender. So let me save this and go back to the spec file and also introduce one more element, that is const gender element colon html select element is equal to fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector of what is my id. The id is hash gender, is my id of the particular element, and here what I'll do is I'll dispatch the events on that. So gender element dot dispatch event of new event of, I'm trying to focus, and also gender element dot dispatch event of new event. Again I'm trying to blur on this. So this is what, and after updating the elements, that means error elements, what we can do is I can get const gender errors, and it is also type of HTML div element, and here fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector of what is my gender element, it is hash gender errors, it is gender errors. Let me copy this and paste here. So gender errors, now I'm getting the gender errors. It should also have an expectation of gender errors or dot children dot length, it should be equal to 2 equal of 1, and expect of gender errors dot children of 0 dot inner html dot 2 equal of what is my error here, this field is required, so let me copy to this field is required and pass here. So if you give semicolon and save this, let's see how it executes. It has been successfully passed. That means we have tested all the three required fields, but in this case every required field or every field is having an error, and then what we will be getting the problem is the button should be disabled. We are missing this type of testing in the same test case. So what I'll do is I'll get that button as well. So I can do one thing, I'll add an ID for this button. So ID equal to submit button, and let me save this. Let's get this ID const submit button, it is of type HTML button element, and let me get the fixture dot debug element dot native element dot query selector of what is the ID. The ID is submit button, copy this and paste here with a hash. So let me go and give semicolon. Now the submit ID or submit button should be in disabled state. So what is my expectation is expect of submit button dot disabled dot to be truthy. So it should be in a truthy state. That means it should be in disabled state. Yeah, our spec file has been successfully passed. So we have tested one use case where all the different types of elements should be required, and that has been validated here. So now what I will do is we will be checking a different strategy of entering the data. That means we will be entering some data in the username and the password, and we will be checking whether that is matching to the pattern or not. So let me write one more it statement, username and password validation with patterns. So now what I will do is I'll give the wrong patterns, and we will be checking the patterns for both username and the password. So for getting the username and the password elements, I can use the same values. Let me copy this, and before that let me update fixture dot detect changes, and fixture dot when stable I'll be getting a promise, and inside this promise I'll pass this. Okay, I'm getting the username element and I'm getting the password element. Let me update the username element value to sai at gmail. It is not a valid Gmail format, and also password element dot value, which should have one special character, five minimum characters, one alphabet, and one number. So what I'll do is I'll not pass the number Sai and symbol. So this is a special character, but I'm not passing an 5 digit, that is also not valid, and as well as I'm not passing 1 2 3. So here these both element values are invalid. Now what I will do is I'll update my fixture again, fixture dot when stable. It is a promise based and it will have a callback. Inside this callback, what I want to do is I want to check the error validation. So how to check the error validation? By getting these elements, and by getting these elements and checking this pattern errors. So what I can do is, instead of doing all that, I'll get the errors first. Let me copy these two, and I'm getting these two error messages, and the expectation will change. Expect of username elements errors dot children dot length. This time also it should have a length of 1. Why? Because the required field is valid. I have entered some value, so it should not show error message for required. And let me check the exact error message for this. Username errors dot children of 0 dot inner html dot to equal of what is the error message. We have to get this error message. Please enter a valid email pattern. Let me copy this and paste here and give semicolon. In the same way, let me expect for password errors. Password errors dot children dot length dot to equal. It should also have only the one which is like inner HTML, which is not a required statement. Expect of password errors dot children of 0 dot inner html dot to equal of what is my message it should show. It should have a message which is like password. This field should have minimum of 5 characters and one alphabet, one numeric, and at least one special character. Copy this and paste here. This should be the string which should be passed. Now it has been failed. Why? Because we are entering the values, but that values should be updated. How to update that values? Username element dot dispatch event of new event. What is the event it has to be generate? It has to be generate an input event to update our ng model. Let me give password element dot dispatch event. It should also dispatch the event to update the password value, that is something like input. So let me save this, and now if you check the values, it has been successfully passed. 2 has been executed successfully. In this case also, our button should be disabled. Let me copy this button. So copy and let me give okay, let me pass the button, and what is my expectation? It should be in disabled state. So expect of submit button dot disabled dot to be truthy. So this is also one test case where we will be checking the patterns for the fields. Now the last test case to check is, if I give all the valid possibilities or valid data to our form, my register button should be enabled. So check validity for entire proper data. Spelling is wrong. Validity. Yeah. And it is a callback. Let me update the fixture first. So fixture dot detect changes and fixture dot when stable. It is a promise based. Let me write it then, and it has a callback. Inside the callback, let me go and get the elements first. So I want to get all the elements which are related to my gender elements. Let me copy this and then paste here. So I'm getting user element, password element, gender element, and I want to give the values for this. So user element dot value will be having a valid one sai@gmail.com, and let me give user password element also valid with 5 characters, and each character should be involved like sai at 123, which is a more than a 5 characters, as well as it includes alphabet, special character, and numeric value. Whereas gender dot value, that is equal to one of the value, that is male or female. So I have given all these values, and I want to emit an event to update the ng model. So user element dot dispatch event of, what is the event, new event of, I want to go with input because we are entering some values, and let me give password element dot dispatch event of new event. I want to give input here also because it is an input field, and then go with gender element dot dispatch event of new event of, what is the value I want to give is change, because the drop down will be changed but we cannot enter some value. And even for better understanding, we'll give female also. Why? Because by default we are giving empty, and when there is a change happened, I can select male or female. It's up to you. You can pass some dummy data where you can get male or female. So this is what we can check. Now after emitting this event, I want to update, detect the changes, and then I want to go with fixture dot when stable. When it is updated, then I have a callback function. Inside this callback function, what I want to do is I want to get all the errors. So for now we should not have any errors. Let me check that. Copy this, or you can go up for getting all the 3 errors. Copy this, and this time it should be, it should not have any errors. For example, how to check that? Expect of username element dot to be null. It should be null because that div should not render. And the same way, expect password element dot to be null. Why? Because this should also not have any errors. Expect of gender errors dot to be null. So it is not element, it is errors. Let me copy this and paste, copy this and paste here. So these three should be null. That is one expectation which we need to reach. Why? Because it should not have any errors. And now let me get the button also. So how we are getting the button? Already we have submit button here. Let me copy this and go down. Now let me declare here. Now what I want to get is expect of submit button dot disabled to be falsy. So it should be false. Now we are not getting any errors and my button should be enabled. Let me save this. Yeah, if you see here, we got 3 successful expectations, and also there is one expectation which we are missing. Whenever there is a change in the HTML content, that should even affect our ng model. So this register object dot username should be equivalent to the username what we have passed. So let me check that. Register object, so expect of component instance dot register object dot username, that will be equal to dot to equal of, that should be equal to the value which we have passed. What is my value? That is sai@gmail.com. Let me copy this and then go here and paste here. And also there is one more expectation, that is component instance dot register object dot password, that should be equal to the password which I passed. So what is the password which we have passed here? The password whatever I have passed is sai@123. Let me copy this and paste here. And also last expectation is component instance dot register object dot gender. What is my gender? It should be equal to the value which we have passed, that is male or female. Let me save this, and all these 3 expectations should also reach. It has been reached all our expectations. Here to summarize, we have tested a username with the required field, password with the required field, select with the required field, and password with the pattern, username with the pattern, with invalid data as well as valid data. We can even test this in a single test cases, but to make it simple, I have tested all the use cases at a time in each and every test case. Hope you guys like my video. If you like my video, like, share, subscribe to my channel for more updates. Signing off. Thank you.